I think you're the only watchdog on Soros at this point. Do you know anybody else who's keeping an eye on him?
Not anybody that's actually gone to court and litigated to force the government to give records to us. Yeah, we just don't talk about it. We do two things. We go to court and litigate. And then I spent 4 days in October down in Guatemala on the ground looking at the caravan issue you were just discussing, interviewing people in the caravan, and then going all the way up to the president of Guatemala, interviewing him as Minister of Defense. So we do it in the courtroom and we do it on the ground.
What'd you find out in Guatemala? What'd you find out?
So I'd say 95% of the guys in the caravan are youth, men between 15 and 40. All the pictures you see of crying women and children, they're there, but they're a super minority. The Minister of Defense of Guatemala told me eyeball to eyeball in an hour-and-a-half interview that he considers this an extremely elaborate, very sophisticated operation. It has almost military precision or qualities about it. And the Guatemalan officials are convinced that leftist groups funded by either Open Society Foundation or its affiliates, as you discussed earlier, kind of the cutouts that are used in between, that it's all being directed, funded, organized by them.
Do they have any theory of why they want to move so many migrants from Central America into the United States?
A large part of it is just political embarrassment and pressure. They're trying to generate a crisis that's advantageous to them and their sort of philosophical, ideological goals. But they also want to try to humiliate President Trump. And essentially, it's kind of like the old Cloward Piven strategy. You know, they want to break the system, and they think by breaking it, they'll get what they want.
And what do they want?
They want open borders. They want unrestricted immigration. They want
unrestricted immigration. And is that for a political reason? Because they believe that immigrants from abroad would vote for left-wing policies?
Correct. Exactly.
Okay. All right.
It's self-serving.
Now, the federal government actually helps George Soros in his quest to change the United States, correct?
Absolutely. But to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer subsidies. Your taxpayer money goes to the billionaire George Soros. Figure that one out.
And tell me how that happens.
Well, what to do is two things. So Soros moved last year about $18 billion of his personal wealth into Open Society Foundation. That funds their overhead and their overall operations. But Open Society Foundation and all of its affiliates and subsidiaries is very smart. They know how to pick the lock on the U.S. Treasury. And so they go to the State Department, they go to the USAID, and they apply for grants and funding for programs, activities, all their sort of pet rock stuff. And our State Department and USAID is stupid enough to actually give them grants. Sometimes they're small, sometimes it's $10,000 or $20,000, but sometimes it's hundreds of millions of dollars, and they essentially outsource our foreign policy to Soros front groups.
Can you give me an example of one very expensive program that Soros is behind, that the federal government has aided?
Sure. In fact, in front of me right now, I have a special report that we're doing on exactly this topic. And so I want to give you a for instance, that's a hard and fast number. But let's say, so there's a couple of $100,000 that went to, give me 1 second, and I'll give you a specific example that's documented. So, International Budget Partnership, $240,000 awarded by USAID to Open Society in 2018. $5.5 million awarded by state and USAID to the National Resource Governance Institute, whatever that is. The National Fair Housing Alliance got $16 million by way of HUD, believe it or not, Housing and Urban Development, not state. The International Crisis Group got $4.2 million from USAID and another $2.25 in 2016. And so
this money goes ostensibly to improve the lives of the poor?
Yeah, all over the world. I mean, Open Society Foundation operates in 37 different countries.
All right, so it's not just United States centric. Does anybody audit the money to see that it's actually going to poor people?
I don't think there's been a full and complete, accurate, accounting of what Open Society has done. And in one case in Albania, they even let Open Society Foundation run, or at least participate in, the grant-making process so that the Albanian Soros front group could receive money. So they're participating in the evaluation of the grant process, and then they themselves are awarded the money. There's some pretty outrageous abuses like that.
Now, people who don't like George Soros and what he's trying to accomplish are appalled that the federal government would actually be giving his organizations money, taxpayer money,
Right.
grants. Okay. People who support Soros, and there are, you're anti-Semitic for even criticizing him, so am I. We're
That's
anti-Semitic.
a vicious smear that is
course.
so maliciously false. No one ever checked with my Jewish family members before they made that comment.
And they don't care. They just want you to be demonized if you go after them. But it's apparent. It's apparent to me, and should be apparent to President Trump and to members of Congress on the Republican side, that Soros is damaging the country by funding Move On, for example. That's your best example. Move On is behind all. If you go right back to the people in the restaurants, to the people assaulting homes and individuals on the street, it's all Move On. Okay? Protests, Antifa, move on, move on, move on. And who funded Move On origination? George Soros. Do you believe George Soros and his foundation is behind the migrant movement?
One way or another, yeah. Financially, they may be filtering it or doing sort of arm's length transactions through cutouts. But eventually, if we're able to forensically walk the money back, I believe that you'll find out that it came out of the coffers of Open Society Foundation via, or actually initially going all the way back to your U.S. taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, that would be a scandal of unbelievable proportions. So stay on it, and we appreciate your time very much today.
Thanks very much.